a big fan of state legislative of using digital media in state legislative races specifically because it is a medium that you can dominate, right? Like you're not going to dominate television if you're running, except in some really extreme circumstances where you have huge districts that cover an entire like cable zone. But you're not going to dominate television if you're running for the state legislature, and you're probably not going to dominate a mailbox either because it's cost prohibitive, but mail is also a great tool. But it is possible to dominate the digital space. And similarly to the targeting availability of direct mail, you can literally take your file of target voters, your file of the people that you're knocking on their doors, sending them direct mail, and you can match these people to their online presences, to their home IP addresses, to their social media profiles, to their mobile device IDs. And you can even go as far as to match other devices in their house that are connected to the same router. So the targeting options available for digital are really something that makes digital just a great tool, especially for state legislative races. Typically, if I'm running a state legislative race, I would say that about 40% of our overall budget is going to be in digital. About another 40% is going to be in mail, and then with 20% between administrative. I'm going to run through just some stuff about our firm, some 2020 stuff. Okay. One of the things that I am really keen on in digital, because everybody says, digital kind of in 2008 became the hot new thing, right? And everybody said, I want to do digital, and because that Obama won because of digital. But we have to be really clear about what that means and making sure there's an ROI that justifies both the time and a financial investment into digital. Specifically, and there are specific and trackable metrics, right? How many online donations did we get? How many volunteer signups? How many new email addresses? How many online IDs did we get? We do a lot of work with the House Caucus in Maryland, and they just had a new appointed member literally a couple of weeks ago, and we're running generation petitions for her right now. And the only way we can demonstrate our value in that, and it's a good expenditure of their funds, is to show that they are having people voluntarily submit their own contact information to this database. So this new legislator now has contact information to her constituents, which will turn into new voters and stuff like that, and to build the relationship. Let's see. So one of the things I always say to candidates at the very front end, when they, when kind of a digital campaign is first begun, is there's a lot of stuff you have to watch out for, because digital can be a great tool. It can also be a massive time suck. And as a candidate, your single most valuable resource, and especially a legislator and a candidate where you have official duties and you have the duties to get yourself reelected. And if you're in leadership, the duties to get yourself reelected, your official duties, and to help other people get elected, right? So a couple things to watch out for. More followers does not mean more voters. No one ever won a vote from a war on Twitter. Social media is not an excuse for not raising money and not knocking doors. The majority of attendees in an ALEC conference are elected state legislators. So I assume that means you all have a lot of worn out shoes from walking door to door, and that's awesome. The entire point of a digital campaign, I'm one of the most pro digital consultants in the country, but the entire point of a digital campaign is to reinforce what you do at the door, right? So that when you get to someone's door and you knock, they've seen you, they've seen a video of you on their phone a couple times, they've seen a video of you in their Facebook newsfeed, they've seen a video of you, on the right rail of a website as they're searching. The entire thing you're doing is amplifying the impact that you have at the door. And then after the individual contact, what you're doing is you're reinforcing that message and possibly reinforcing a specific message. Even though it takes a lot of time and effort to do this, I've had campaigns as small as state Senate campaigns where we've taken the IDs from the door, right? We've taken what we've learned at the door. This person, gun rights or economy or education is their most important issue, and run different ads to them digitally based on the information that they gave us at the door. And it's been just incredibly effective. So back to point number 3. Social media, digital media is not an excuse for not raising money and not knocking doors. It is an in addition to and not an instead of. And lastly, and most importantly, you are not Donald Trump. There is no worse moment than when a candidate tells me that they're going to win like Trump did, right? They're going to win online and on Twitter and on through social media. And what I always, and my response to that always is, how many of your own $1 million are you putting in this race, and what #1 television show did you host for 10 years, right? The ability, the effect of digital in a presidential race, and the ability of digital in a presidential race versus the ability of digital in a state senate, state house, down ballot statewide race is very different. Oh, really, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Quick thing about websites, I would always encourage you, do not have your cousins, best friends, son's brother build your website. I mean, the majority, the website is where people go to find out everything about you now. Something like 67% of voters Google down ballot candidates in the last week before they cast their vote, because your average state legislator around the country has a name ID of between 15 and 19%. So even a community that you've represented for 2 decades, a lot of those people don't know who you are outside of kind of the party activists and the party faithful. And your website is your kind of first meeting to the world. 81% of all websites are viewed on mobile. So having a great mobile compatible website is a super important thing. And the most important thing that your website can ever do, no one is going to spend 7 hours on your website reading your policy position on, micro Asian debt relief, right? And the most important thing your website can do is collect contact information so you can form an ongoing relationship with the constituent. I'm a huge believer in modeling in any campaign, because what digital allows you to do, similar to direct mail, is it allows you to break out your contact universe, and for the same price, not run one message to an entire group, but run various messages to various groups. So we have typically in our campaign, we will break out our universes to our base voters, who are ideally people we should never have to talk to. And if we do want to talk to them, it's to ask for funds, right? Solicitation and volunteer signups. Our get out the vote universe, people we know that if they're going to vote, they're going to vote for us. So the content that we run them is, quite often sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's the Democrats are about to win. If you let the Democrats win, we're all, your tax rates are going to be 90% or whatever. But it's not, and here's how you go vote now. Here's your early voting location. Here's your poll place. But it's not a persuasion content. And then we have our persuasion universe, which is typically the smallest universe. And those are people who are legitimately undecided. And that is the smallest group in any race. Then you have a Democratic base, right? Or your opponent's base, which your goal is to suppress that vote, right? Your goal is to convince them that, your opponent is a vote they should skip. They should get into the ballot box and they should vote for Biden, and then they should vote for Steve Bullock, but they should, walk out of the ballot box before voting for that Democratic legislative candidate. And then you have the Democratic GOTV universe. So your goal is to suppress that universe so you can run negative content to that universe. And then the Democratic base is a group that you generally leave alone. But my point being in this whole thing is, all voters are not created equal. All messages are not created equal. And every campaign, from the smallest to the largest, needs to employ some sort of modeling and ideally different digital targeting to each subset of that universe. There's kind of a visual of what a model looks like. I'm sure any of you who've run for higher office, or some of you've used modeling in your campaigns, have seen something like this. Every voter gets a score and is mapped somewhere, and to our good visualization of the voters we're talking to about what, and most importantly, the voters we're not talking to, like the Democratic base and our own base. Building, in a legislative race, right? A lot of you, and it's it's a tough thing because you have Texas legislative races which average out at 750,000 to 1.2 million dollars, and then you have like Arkansas legislative races which average out to like $12,000, right? So there's different tools and subsets available in each sort of race. But if you don't have the advantage of buying an analytical model for your own race, you can build your own model, your own swing universe model, your own target universe model with cheap or publicly available data, right? If you use tools like I360, you can learn. You have the income and the demographics available to you of your voters, right? So if you're running in a slightly lean Democratic district, it's not a bad idea for you to maybe target Democrats who are married, who own homes, who make over $60,000 a year. That is a winnable vote for you. Using the tools available to most of you from your individual state parties, data center, data trust, stuff like that, you can target Republicans who've supported Democrats in the past, who will have to shore up their vote. You can target unaffiliated and Democratic voters who've supported Republicans in the past. You can target Democratic voters who support one or more GOP issues, right? Hardcore Democrats who support a balanced budget amendment. In almost every race that I do, we build out a universe of Democrats who support BBA, just because that's an issue that tends to have a lot of Democratic support, and especially among older Democrats. And then we just run a digital campaign on that one issue, that one Republican issue that they support to them constantly. One of the things that I'm, and this is kind of circling around to digital specifically, but how it fits in the larger picture. One of the things that I'm really big on is, I think there is, I swear to God, I was almost chased with pitchforks when I made this statement when I was teaching the Nevada Republican Party's candidate school. I detest when state legislators and legislative candidates go to Republican events when they're campaigning, because you've got a room full of people who maybe a third of them can vote for you at best, depending upon how many legislative districts you have in that area, right? All of them are votes you already have, and like at best they might write checks for $25, $50, right? But I watch all these candidates who in absolute earnest and well-meaning go spend their day at Republican Club, Republican Women's Club, active Republican Women's Club, Tea Party Club, Rotary Club. There was a study done by The Atlantic last year that every American who will ever engage in politics in any way, a civically active American, represents less than 1% of the entire voting population. And so many of our legislators and so many of our candidates spend their entire lives hopping from club. I have a very close relationship with the police union here in Las Vegas, and we do a lot of work with them. And so I was at one of their events, and the president of the union is a friend of mine. He was talking about one of the judicial candidates, and he meant this as a compliment, but I almost started laughing. He says, this judicial candidate, he's such a great guy. He's already gotten our endorsement. He's already gotten our check. He's already gotten every vote. There's literally no reason for him to be here at all. But but instead of knocking doors or making phone calls or raising money or meeting voters, he's here tonight. And he meant it as a compliment, but I had to hide my chuckles. And then that candidate went on and lost, right? I'm a huge believer that every piece of contact, every hour of your day, every dollar that you raise should be spent on contact to this one target group of voters, from text messages, Facebook ads, IP address match ads, direct mail, door to door. Everything should happen to one universe. If anyone has any questions or comments at any time, feel free to shout it out. I'm used to doing these things in person, so getting used to doing it on Zoom is a little difficult here. So I apologize if I'm not taking enough time to answer any questions. But if you've got a question, just go ahead and shout it out. Hopefully something similar to this is something you all are familiar with. This is a little bit of an older chart. I used this a decade ago. But it's still very similar, right? In running in a small race where, let's say you have 40,000 voters, your entire goal is to identify voters and drop them in one of two buckets. Either they support you or they support your opponent. And typically you start with a positive piece of content or a positive contact, and then you try and identify them as your supporter or your opponent's supporter. And then if that doesn't work, you hit them with a negative piece of content and then try and move them into qualifying as your supporter or your opponent's supporter, moving them either to the GOTV universe, which we've talked about, right, where you will get what was I going to say? Where you will get donations, yard signs, volunteers, or the suppression universe where we just want to run negative content to them to hopefully keep them from voting for your opponent. But ideally, and if a campaign, especially on a small level, like a state legislative campaign, is being run correctly, you have a database of every voter in your district, and you're not saying, hey, let's go mail all the white males over 60. You're saying we're going to send John Smith a piece of mail because we've talked to John Smith 3 times, and John is leaning toward us, but he's not ready to be, but he's not ready to commit. And we're going to send Mary a piece of mail because Mary, and a complimentary digital ad because Mary is undecided, and we've tried her with a positive message and we haven't won yet. I mean, that is how, we in most campaigns have anywhere from 5 to 15 different target universes. And I believe that is the beauty of digital, and that is the way that campaigns will be successful in the future. I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was, take all your money and put it on broadcast television and, hope for the best. And going forward, digital micro-targeting is the future consistently. And the key in this is taking someone from the top of this list here, a modeled likely supporter, and moving them all the way through this funnel till they're an active advocate, till they're in that step 4 would be your GOTV universe, till they're a donor, a volunteer, and a voter. To run through your online mediums, Facebook is the single best online medium available. Hopefully, Facebook will go back to allowing political advertising, soon. They've said very soon. We will see. But more time is spent on Facebook than every other digital property combined, right? The largest Facebook usership is older white males. Like, Facebook is where our people hang out. As youth voters have, as what am I trying to say here? As grandparents, right, have joined Facebook. Millennials, the younger voters, have left Facebook and gone on to other properties like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, stuff like that. Your stereotypical white, Asian American, Hispanic American, business owner, suburban, older family voter is on Facebook. Cannot overstate, of a digital budget, of your entire digital budget, we'll go into this, the majority should be spent on Facebook. YouTube. YouTube is not a targetable property, meaning you cannot take a direct mail file and load it to YouTube. You could do that, some 10 odd years ago. However, YouTube is owned by Google, so content in YouTube comes up when you're doing a Google search. So having a YouTube channel and a YouTube presence is important, but I'm not a big fan of ad spending on YouTube. Instagram, owned by Facebook, so it allows you to target through the same properties, and it allows you to target those individual lists like we've discussed. Which is great because you don't have to place Instagram specific ads. But very truthfully, if you're targeting correctly, less than 5% of your money will ever be spent on Instagram. Again, it's a much younger platform, not where persuadable Republican voters hang out. Twitter is completely an echo chamber tool. You are never going to win a vote on Twitter, but the people who are on Twitter are press, legislative staff, state party staff, consultants. I'm a big believer in a Twitter presence just to make sure your content is in front of the people who write the political gossip columns and write about your endorsements and write about your fundraising successes and fundraising failures and so on and so forth. LinkedIn is a total waste of time. Don't spend any time on LinkedIn. Snapchat will never ever get you a vote, but sometimes you can get some cool press stories out of it because they have a geofencing tool. So when I was at Harris Media and we were doing the campaign against, we were doing Rob Portman's reelection against Governor Strickland. Every time he held an event, we would buy a Snapchat filter for that event, and we'd say, hi, I'm so and so here at the event in this county, and when and when my opponent was governor, we lost 11,000 jobs in this county or whatever. And then we'd take a screenshot of it, we'd send it to the press, and they'd always write up a little cool story about the Democratic event. And at the last line of the event was how we were trolling him with a Snapchat filter. So we got our talking point into all of their stories. So a cool and cheap thing that that can kind of troll your opponents a little bit. The goal with social content is always to get as many people to leave the social platform and interact with you in a way that they're giving you their information as possible. When for the Republican Party in Minnesota, we did this great petition, about comparing Amy Klobuchar to the Horrible Bosses movie, and we got just a ton of contact information for Minnesota voters. That's always the goal, is to have them interact, take them from an online interaction to an offline interaction. Huge believer in crowdsource content, right? When you're asking your supporters and your constituents to develop and submit their own content. One, it's hugely usable in future ad content, but two, it's a great way to get people to submit and give you their contact information to begin developing that future relationship. Huge believer in online petitions. I would imagine, hopefully you all are running them. Hopefully you all are running them aggressively and all the time. What's the most important issue to you? Do you believe in tax raises? Do you believe in school choice? A great way to, one, get a piece of data about what a voter supports or doesn't support, but also, and most importantly, to build your list of people that you're going to have a long-term, hopefully, relationship with. That's going to go from a supporter, a voter, a donor, and a volunteer. Any questions, comments, concerns, or personal attacks thus far?
Roy, I do have a quick question. Could you expand a little bit on petition signatures cost between $1 to $5? Is that out of your
Sure.
Is that out of the campaign fund, or is that what you can potentially bring in because of the information you're gaining?
So that's a great question, Will. So one, typically, so you have to run an ad, right, to get anyone to see your petition, and typically the cost per conversion is between $1 and $5. Now, sometimes on really good content, they'll be cheaper than that. We years ago, I did one for U.S. Senator Roger Wicker, which when Kathy Griffin did the whole Donald Trump's head thing, right? We had run a petition, ban Kathy Griffin, and we were getting conversions for like 45 cents. But your average is going to be between $1 and $5. Now, the good news there is, every self-submitted email, every email that someone voluntarily provides, is worth $12.86 over the long term. So that email, which is voluntarily provided, in the long term becomes something that's revenue positive for you. Now, it might take a while to get there because you have to email those people 5, 6, 7, 10 times before they've contributed 2 or 3 times. But in the long run, every email that is submitted to you should be a revenue positive proposition.
Yeah, because I know just the way thank you for clarifying. The way it works is sometimes you might have to buy a list of your constituents or who you want to reach out to. This bypasses that list, so that makes sense. Thank you.
And I'm never a fan of buying like an email list or anything like that.
Yeah.
I've tried it a handful of times in my career. And I've spent like a lot of money trying it over the years, and just most often, right, people don't use the same email they used 5 years ago, right? Like, I have email addresses that I probably have the login to somewhere, but I haven't checked in years, right? I'll give you an example. I still have an active email from a governor's race I worked on 6 years ago. I haven't checked it probably in 6 years, but I never got rid of it. But if you were to buy a corporate email list from me, buy a corporate email list from a data warehouse, it is very possible that is still the email address that they have on me. So always prefer opt-in content to data purchase content.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. online volunteers converting, this is such a crucial thing, especially for state legislative races. In a state legislative race, you have the unfortunate challenge of competing with the up-ticket races for resources, right? You're competing with, the Trump campaign and the Senate campaign and the governor's campaign and whatever else for volunteers. So the majority of, in my experience, people who volunteer for legislative campaigns are friends and family of the candidate, co-workers of the candidate, stuff like that. And most of those people are not going to live in a centralized geographic area. So one of the things I do with every one of my legislative campaigns is I make sure they have a tool to volunteer online. There's a tool that cousin Bob out in Idaho can make phone calls for his cousin who's running for the state house in New Hampshire, or whatever the case may be. And I think that is just an absolute and essential tool for every legislative candidate, because of how diverse your volunteer organization is probably going to be. And being able to take that person from an online sign up straight into that that voter contact, online voter contact portal is huge. Online fundraising, just going to touch on this very briefly. There is always opportunities to raise money online. I'm a big believer in don't make every email a fundraising email. Maybe 40% of emails should be fundraising emails. Don't burn your list. Ideally, if you're in the legislature, you might serve a couple terms in the House, a couple terms in the state Senate, and then maybe go on to a larger career from there. So sending 7 emails a day, while you'll get the best immediate return on it, you'll burn your entire fundraising list. I'm a big believer in giving online donors something, giving them first look at a new ad, giving them first look at a poll and stuff like that, so they have a reason to open your emails. Two of the biggest forms of ad content that I use is targeting on Facebook and IP address targeting. Both ways that we can literally take a file of voters, right? We can take Will Davies, who lives at 123 Cherry Street in Arlington, Virginia, and we can match him to his individual social profile, and we can match him to his home IP address, and his mobile device ID and his home router. So we're not running ads to everybody in the district. We're not running ads to all the Republicans in the district. We are running ads to a very specific group of matched and targeted voters. And that is just so crucial and so important. So if everybody takes away one thing that I say today, it's, and I can't tell you how often I see this. I mean, I see it so often. I'll be scrolling on Facebook at night as I'm about to go to sleep, and I'll get an ad from some legislative candidate, not whose district I don't live in or whose state I don't even live in. But the worst ones are, some person running on the entire opposite side of the state from me, and it's just like, do you not know that you can literally take your voter file and match that to individual accounts? And I think here's the problem. If you're running for governor or US Senate or something like that, it makes perfect sense. So I'm going to go hire a firm to do this for me, right? But if you're running for state legislature, oftentimes I think people think, I just have to do this myself. Excuse me. And then what happens is they go and try and place their own digital ads using a self-serve process, and in doing so, they just say, okay, well, I guess I'm running. I'll target every likely conservative in Cincinnati, Ohio, right? As opposed to, I'm going to upload a file of my targeted voters in this district. And that is just so crucial. I hope I don't have to come back next year and say that again. I mean, but the amount of times that I saw digital ads running outside of candidates' districts was insane. And like, you wouldn't send mail into another district. Sending a digital ad into another district without using voter file targeting is just totally crazy. If you're building out a digital budget, this is approximately how it should look. 40 to 45% of your budget should be Facebook, but 10 to 15% of your budget should be Google search ads. When somebody types in your name or your opponent's name, you want to control the content that they see at the top of the screen there. Almost 70% of people cannot tell the difference between a paid search ad and an organic ad. Or an organic result, right? So if you're running against John Smith and you buy the website, learn the truth about johnsmith.com, and you put that in a Google search ad, you want to control that when people are searching for your opponent, they're seeing your negative messaging, right? Display ads, about a quarter of your budget. Display ads are those ads you see on the right rail of websites that you visit, the videos you see in between the articles or that are pre-roll that that come before a video you're going to watch on the local news website. Crucially important, because again, we can target those by individual voters, their home IP addresses, and their mobile device IDs. Super, super crucial to have that level of targeting. Something I want to talk about for a minute that I talk about in everything: contextual ad targeting. Not something that should be a part of a regular ad buy, but something that everyone should know about if they need it. So what you can do, one of the tools in our arsenal, is what you can do is you can target online articles by their content, right? So if a really negative article comes out about you, you can buy all the ads around that article saying, click here to learn the real truth about this lying article, or vice versa. If a great article comes out about your opponent, you can buy all the ad content around that article saying, learn the truth about my lying sleazy opponent, click here to go to to our website, right? Contextual targeting, huge tool that everyone should be aware of, and again, can be utilized at the smallest to the largest levels. In-stream content. This was for a legislative candidate in Nebraska. The whole goal with any kind of online advertising is, how do you stop the voter from scrolling? How do you make your content stand out? So we're big believers in what's called frame break content, where it looks like the subject is walking out of the frame at you, and I think that's a great way to make your ad dollars go just a little bit further. Let's see here. Big believer in peer-to-peer texting, especially nowadays that that we have the ability to actually not just text a link to a video, but text a video itself. We're doing that in some ledge races in Texas right now. And again, your goal is to put as much lead on as few targets as humanly possible. If there's a voter who is seeing your content on Facebook and on Hulu and on display, you want them also to see that on their phones. And you can take that same ad that you're running, Facebook, Hulu, display, wherever, and text the video itself, not a link, the video itself. We typically see one of the best completion rates on embedded text. So guys, that's kind of the overview, the quick and dirty of it. Again, more than happy to take any questions, comments, concerns, and or personal attacks.